In the dim gaslight of Victorian London's foggy alleys, two women draped in tattered shawls prowl the street, searching for their next clients. They are some of the thousands of streetwalkers eking out a living in the city's underbelly. Women whom polite society called fallen and condemned as a great social evil. Today, we explore the grim existence of life as a prostitute in Victorian London, a life defined by hunger, disease, violence, and shame. By mid-Victorian times, the shadow of prostitution lay across every slum and street corner of London. Police registers documented only 5,000 to 8,000 women arrested for solicitation or brothel keeping, yet sensational press reports inflated numbers to as many as 50,000 to 80,000 unfortunates. In this era, any unwed woman engaging in sex outside marriage risked the stigma of fallen, a label far broader than streetwalking alone. Most were driven by dire economic need, so-called respectable work in factories, laundry houses, or domestic service paid starvation wages. When paydays failed to cover rent, food, or the care of children, many saw no other means of survival but to sell sexual favors. A tiny minority worked as high-class courtesans, earning enough from elite clients to retire, but the vast majority were seamstresses, servants, or rural migrants compelled into the streets by unemployment, eviction, or pregnancy. These prostitutes were overwhelmingly young working-class women, often former servants dismissed or cast out after a seduction left them pregnant. Others drifted gradually into streetwalking, keeping their day jobs while taking occasional nighttime clients to make ends meet. Their brief flirtation with amateur prostitution sometimes allowed them to slip back into respectable life when circumstances improved. Such women often did not consider themselves irredeemably fallen, and indeed many hoped to save enough money to leave the life. Many, however, were unable to return to polite society and descended into full-time prostitution. Nightfall in Victorian London's poorer districts brought the unfortunates out to ply their trade under the gas lamps. A streetwalker's daily life was a cycle of uncertainty and danger. She might begin her evening wandering a known red light area, perhaps the Strand, Haymarket, Whitechapel, or around train stations like Waterloo, where Granby Street was notorious for its women half-naked beckoning from windows. Clad in cheap finery or well-worn dresses, these women braved the elements year-round. They spent long hours trudging through rain and cold, loitering on corners and outside pubs to catch the eye of potential clients. Many were homeless or lived day-to-day in lodging houses, so earning a few coins by midnight was critical just to pay for a bed and a meager meal. It was not uncommon to hear a shivering prostitute beg a passerby for the price of a night's lodging. If luck was against her and she found no clients, she might sleep rough in the alleys or sell what few belongings she had to avoid that fate. Clients, ranging from sailors to slumming gentlemen, often turned violent, robbing or assaulting women who had no legal standing and feared that any complaint might land them in prison for soliciting. The most horrific example of violence came in 1888, when an unknown predator, infamously dubbed Jack the Ripper, stalked Whitechapel's impoverished prostitutes. In the span of a few months, 5 street women were not only murdered but gruesomely mutilated late at night. The threat of disease also loomed large. Venereal illnesses like syphilis and gonorrhea were endemic. Untreated syphilis could disfigure, deafen, blind, or drive a woman insane, while gonorrhea brought chronic pain and infertility. Lock hospitals offered forced confinement for treatment, but the cure was often as humiliating as the disease. Not all Victorian prostitutes roamed the streets. Many worked in brothels which ranged from lavishly furnished townhouses to filthy cribs in slums. A brothel worker might enjoy a roof over her head and some protection from street violence, but her life was hardly easier. In upscale establishments, known euphemistically as disorderly houses or gentlemen's clubs, women served wealthy clients by appointment. These high-end madames enforced strict rules. Girls had to be young and attractive, dress elegantly. Often the madame would front the cost of gowns and cosmetics, and be available on demand. The surroundings were comfortable and the pay could be better, but the work was relentless and appearances had to be kept up at all times. A brothel girl in the West End might see several clients in a day, from evening until the early hours, then collapse into bed only to start again the next night. She also typically owed a hefty portion of her earnings to the house. Exploitation was common. Madames would charge exorbitant fees for board and clothing, keeping the women perpetually in debt and unable to leave. In lower-class brothels, perhaps a few rented rooms in a rookery, conditions were downright dire. Several women might share a single tiny room to entertain customers in succession. Privacy, sanitation, and safety were minimal. If a client turned violent, there was little recourse except the hope that other girls or a bouncer might intervene. Brothels themselves were targets of both criminals and the law. Pimps and bullies loitered around these houses, often protecting the premises in exchange for a cut of profits, or sometimes just extorting money with threats. Police periodically raided brothels, not necessarily to rescue the women, but to appease public complaints about vice. The women caught in raids were usually released with a fine or a warning, unless they were charged with solicitation, but a brothel keeper could face prison. This instability meant brothel workers might find themselves out on the street if a house suddenly closed. The grim existence of a prostitute in Victorian London was a life of survival against the odds, played out in shadowy alleys and cramped garrets under the constant spectre of hunger, infection, and abuse. These women lived at society's margins, shunned, exploited, and largely unheard, except when they became a problem to be policed or a soul to be saved. And yet, their presence forced Victorian society to confront its own contradictions. The wealth and poverty side by side. The rigid morals that demanded female purity while tolerating male vice. The philanthropy that aspired to rescue the fallen even as economic structures pushed so many over the brink. If you found this exploration into the lives of Victorian ladies of the night interesting, be sure to check out our video about the life of a galley slave in the Age of Sail on your screen now. If you've made it this far, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps us out. Thank you for watching, stay curious, and we'll see you on the next one.